What's going on, people? Welcome back to another episode of Get It Bucket Podcast with me, your host, Chris LeBron. As always, I'm joined by my guy, Kev. Kev, what's going on, brother?
Man, I'm great. I'm excited. We got a great slate of college hoops today. We had great games all last week, which we're going to talk about in a minute. But glad to be back. It's been a nice little week. We already in the month of December. It's crazy. I can't even fathom that the year is about to be over. But I'm glad to be here, man. How about yourself? How you doing?
I'm doing good, man. I got a big game tonight. My Blue Devils taking on possibly, a team we're going to talk about in a little bit in the Auburn Tigers. Where are they ranked, Auburn? Are they number one or number two?
I believe there are two. I want to say Kansas is ranked number one right now.
Kansas, and Kansas took beat us without Hunter that last week. But we got a lot to talk about. I said there was a lot of good games. During Feast Week, so many. Classics. We felt like we saw. The crazy. What it was Baylor. What was the one? Baylor St. John's was great. Like there was just, the abundance of overtime games that we saw. It really was a very fun week. But Kev, let's get into it with all those magical games. What were some games that stood out to you during Feast Week?
Man, I'll start off in the Maui Invitational, right? The first day, you had Memphis and UConn go to overtime. You had Auburn beat Iowa State off a tip-in by Janai Broome. It was so many good games. Even that last day was crazy, right? You had the championship game where Auburn smacked Memphis. You had an overtime game between Mont Spartans and North Carolina. You had Dayton beat UConn. It was just all around chaos and madness. And, you look at the battle for Atlantis, right? You had West Virginia. They played in 2 overtime games. They played in overtime versus Gonzaga, where at that time Gonzaga was ranked number 3. They beat them. Then they played Louisville, I believe, the next game, and ended up losing that game in overtime. But it was just so many games, like you said, in overtime. Like you had y'all take on Kansas, right? You had all these crazy games. You look at the championship game of the Players Era Festival. You had Houston versus Oregon. Oregon ended up getting the win and winning that. Shout out to Dana Altman and the Ducks. Definitely praying for Latrell Wrightsell for Bama. I've seen he's out for the year with an Achilles injury, which is super unfortunate. And then, sticking in that same tournament, if you didn't watch Houston versus Alabama going to overtime, that was a super fun game. Like I thought the contrast in style of play, between Houston's defense and Alabama's get up and down offense was one of the better matchups I've seen in college basketball this season. And just all around, bro, so many good games. Texas A&M Creighton was pretty good. It was just everywhere you looked, man. It was games going on 24/7 from 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. You know what I'm saying? So shout out to college hoops because I think last week was a major, major win for college basketball as a whole.
Yeah, and we talked about that before, like how college basketball usually doesn't have there's good matchups, some couple, but it's a few games here, but it's mostly you were seeing, big schools play against, feels like JUCO colleges, right? And it's, you're not really invested, but it really felt like it had a different energy where people who usually wait, the March Madness casuals, are like, whoa, I got people hitting me up that usually wait till, the beginning of the year to start dialing in. And they were like, yo, did you watch this? Did you at random games? I think it was Ole Miss and Purdue. Purdue won by like a bucket. They were talking about, yo, did you see that? Like, and the Baylor versus St. John's. That was, our old point guard at Duke. We could probably use him right about now too, but that's a whole nother story. But that was an impressive. We just Kansas versus Duke. That was it. Just really feels like this is to me very healthy for college basketball that we're getting this because there's so much going on right now. You have the NBA, you got every NBA football, you got college football, especially with their college football playoff, thing going on. People are so locked in. We got the NFL season, playoff season going on. So there's so much, going on, and usually college basketball takes a back seat to all that. And now it's like, no, hey, we're right in there. We're gonna make the beginning of the season matter. And with everything going on, there's just so many good storylines. So everything, so this is really good, and I'm really happy that we're getting the people who usually wait till the beginning of next year, beginning of the new year to watch that. I'm like, oh, hey man, I'm gonna watch this game. We got some good games, and it's just like you just see random games going on, and that's good, and I'm really happy that, because the more eyeballs, the better. There's a lot of good basketball going on. I mean, some people say there's better college basketball going on than in the pros, and that might be right, because there's a lot of good going on, and there's teams that the freshmen are really helping too, because I really felt like the last few years, we've been seeing a lot of dominance from the older teams, and the freshmen take it out, but the freshmen are what kind of gets those people to really care, and we're seeing a lot of that. And Rutgers is an interesting team too, very interesting. They've had some tough losses, but seeing them grow, Dylan Harper's been an absolute, he's been on a tear, and Ace has had his ups and downs, but he's still playing great. But it's been fun, man. This has been a great start to college basketball, so just throw some takeaways, man. Like what stood out to you? Who's been disappointing, these last few weeks, and because we haven't done the pod in a little bit. So what's just been your takeaway these last few weeks with Feast Week, and then just everything going on right now in college?
So my first one, I'm gonna stick in the SEC, and I'm gonna talk about the team that you just brought up, who your Blue Devils face tonight, and that is the Auburn Tigers. And I think the way that they ran through the Maui Invitational, outside of, again, that first game versus Iowa State where they barely won by a tip-in, they were down 18 and a half. To me, Auburn is clearly the best team in the country. And I think Bruce Pearl has done not just a great job of bringing in talent down there to Auburn, but of retaining talent, because you look at their rotation, they played 9 guys, and 8 of those 9 are seniors. 8 of those 9. The only non-senior is Tahad Pettiford, who in my eyes is one of the top freshmen in the country out of New Jersey, right? Coming out from Hudson Catholic. So to me, Auburn should be looked at as the national championship favorites as of right now. Now, if you know me, I don't really care about that too much, just because again, we're in December, so much more season left to be played. It's a whole bunch of different things that can go on. But the way that they are playing right now, Janai Broome, to me, is clearly ahead of the National Player of the Year race, right? He is dominant. Not only has he effectively mastered the post game at the college level, but he's stepping out to the three. He's isolating, he's diming up, he's passing out. Like, he does everything. He rebounds his butt off. To me, he has one of the most complete games in the country. But then you're seeing other guys step up. I think Miles Kelly has been a great addition from Georgia Tech, right? Tahad Pettiford is only gaining more and more confidence. You're looking at Dylan Cardwell and Chaney Johnson just ascend. Then you got guys like Chance Moore that just come in and give you a whole bunch of different energy, making plays, getting the bench revved up. So Auburn is tough. I can't wait for that game tonight. Y'all playing prime time, if I'm not mistaken. That's going to be a hell of a matchup between a young team and a very experienced team for the most part. So I'm looking at Bruce Pearl's Tigers. I'm saying, man, they, to me, have all the recipes that you can possibly have to win a national championship this winter, or spring, I guess, technically, in San Antonio, and hang up a banner down there, which would be crazy because, again, Auburn is a football school, and Bruce Pearl has really revived that. I don't even know if you want to say revive, but Bruce Pearl has given an energy to that program that they've never had before. And for them to be at this level, playing at these heights with all the talent that they've had between Sharif Cooper, Jabari Smith, Isaac Okoro, amongst others, I mean, you just got to salute to that program, that coaching staff, and what Bruce Pearl has built down there in the Plains, because they look dominant right now.
Yeah, and Chad Baker Mazar has been good too. He's been very good for them. So they're just so balanced, and that's what's kind of worried about me with this matchup. As we're talking on Wednesday night, versus Duke is okay. Like, they're a very experienced team. Very upperclassmen, led, where we're reliant on our 2 freshmen, and it's Cooper's been, had done his thing, but we've seen Con, have some 5 to 20 games, and his shot it looked good the first few games, and he's been off. So I worry this could be a game that, Auburn just absolutely, they take it to us, So if I'm Duke, I hope I'm watching. Like we mentioned before, I hope they're watching that Iowa State film from when Auburn played them, because Iowa State not known for being an offensive team and not a good 3-point shooting team, but they shot the 3-point well pretty well, and they attacked. They weren't afraid of Auburn, and obviously they're more veteran laden team too. So you have that, but I wonder if they're going to watch any of that and try to emulate what Iowa State try to do, because if they try to do what they did versus Kansas, it could get ugly. Kansas probably should have won that. I know with big man Dickinson but that's a game they probably should have won. But we'll see. I'm worried, man. This could be a game where it could be a blowout potentially. And I haven't felt that way, but it's we'll see what happens. But Auburn is they have been absolutely lights out. If you had to say right now, Auburn versus the field, right now, off top of the dome, do you think Auburn versus the field for the national championship? Would you take Auburn?
I'm gonna always take the field just because I just think that's the logical thing to do. But I will say, what you just mentioned right there, that Iowa State game, to me, I still like Iowa State as the favorites to win it. I'm not gonna lie to you. I know, again, I just talked up Auburn, but again, as you just mentioned, in that first game, the first round of the Maui Invitational, Iowa State was up 18 points at half. And the name that you mentioned that I somehow forgot, Chad Baker-Mazar, he had 2 points, and I think he hyperextended his leg in the first half. In the second half, he had 16 points, and I think he had like 11 of those in like the first 5 minutes of the second half, right? He had an and 1 3. He had a 3 that he hit on his own on that right wing, and then he had an assist to Miles Kelly, which was from super deep that he hit too. So he is an ultimate glue guy. But I'm going to take the field just because I still believe in Iowa State, and I think Iowa State has yet to make a statement because they haven't really played nobody like that outside the Maui Invitational. But tonight they do play Marquette, and I think Iowa State's going to get a big-time win and a major win. I think people are going to realize, like, okay, this team is still just as good, if not better than what they were last year. And so I'm going to take the field, but it is tough because, again, like Auburn, they don't – like when you have that amount of experience, leadership, defense, you can rebound – I mean, yeah, I guess you can kind of question the offense because Bruce Pearl does just let them take whatever shots they want from however far they want to. But outside of that, I mean, again, like the way that they play, it's just a tough matchup nightmare for any coach out there because they have so many guys that can beat you by themselves. And I don't even think we've seen the best of Tahad Pettiford, Denver Jones, or Miles Kelly for that matter. So that's what, and we haven't even mentioned JP Pegues. He was like the big time transfer from Furman that they were supposed to, get. I mean, they got him, but like, it's just they have so much firepower that it's kind of scary. So I'm gonna take the field, but it is tough to go against these Tigers right now. Even if they lose to y'all tonight, like okay, like they lost at Cameron Indoor Stadium. I'm not gonna kill them for that. So I'm gonna take the field though.
Okay. What else? What are the takeaways you have from this week?
West Virginia, Darren DeVries. I got to give a big shout out to this dude too because he won a lot of games at Drake out there in Iowa. I believe he got them to multiple NCAA tournament appearances. And for him to finally take a job at the high major level, going from Drake to West Virginia, we know West Virginia the last few years has been in much more turmoil than they've had success on the court with the Bob Huggins stuff. You had the interim coach last year. You have players leave. But what he did in that transfer portal and what he did with his coaching staff, most importantly, hiring Chester Frazier away from his alma mater in Illinois, bringing in Amani Hansberry, bringing in Sincere Harris, getting Javon Small. And that's where I'm going to stop because Javon Small, to me, was one of the best guards in the portal that barely anybody was talking about because this dude, had he played on a better team last year in the Big 12, he was at Oklahoma State, obviously left Oklahoma State because they fired Coach Boynton. They brought in Coach Lutz from Western Kentucky. But had he been on a better Big 12 team, he would have been first team all Big 12.
Yeah.
I believe it was Taman Lipsey, Jamal Shedd, if I'm not mistaken, and then a couple other guys, rightfully so. But Javon Small was just as good as those two first names I just mentioned. And people don't talk about it because, again, he was playing on Oklahoma State, and they were just bad. But you're seeing it now. They went down to the battle for Atlantis. Again, he had 31 against Gonzaga, who was ranked number 3 at the time. And Gonzaga has Ryan Nembhard, Nolan Hickman, and Khalif Battle. And he outplayed them by a cool distance, by a wide margin, right? And then he goes in the next day and he kills Louisville. And I know they lost the game, but just everything that he's doing, he's been doing this. And it's crazy because he's originally from South Bend, Indiana, which is the home of Notre Dame. But in the grander scheme of things, the state of Indiana, which has Indiana, Purdue, Notre Dame, all these top schools, and all of them passed Javon Small. And he was at Arizona Compass in high school, which is a profound high school, if you guys know about high school basketball. So Javon Small, I just got to salute because he is one of the best guards in the nation. And he is one of those guards that when West Virginia gets into the tournament, I actually think they will. You do not want to see a guard like that because he can make or break a game by himself. And we haven't.
And they could shoot the three too.
Exactly.
That's dangerous.
That's where I was going. We haven't even touched on Tucker DeVries.
His son, yeah, coach's son, yeah.
Exactly. Who was the star for Coach DeVries, his son, obviously, at Drake, who is a dog. I want to say he's somewhere between like 6'6", 6'8", maybe, can shoot from anywhere on the floor. He understands exactly what his dad wants to do when it comes to game planning and schemes and all the different things. And then you're seeing guys, the X factor to me is Amani Hansberry because he is a matchup problem. And I think if you're a fan of another Big 12 team, you should be concerned about this dude because he can play through dribble handoffs. You can run the offense through him. He can pick and pop. He can pick and roll. He can dice you up. It's so many different things that he can do on the floor that can just pick you apart. And he's only going to get better and better and better. And I'm glad that him and Sincere Harris both left Illinois because as a Michigan State fan, I really did not want to see them. But they're going to cause a lot of problems in the Big 12. So just look out for the Mountaineers because I'll say this too. In the grander scheme of things, the Big 12, I'm going to be honest, y'all, has not looked as good as we hyped it up to be.
We hyped it up.
Being honest. Outside of Houston, even though they've struggled, I think they're 4-3 right now. I still believe in Houston, by the way. But Houston, Kansas, and Iowa State. After that, Baylor's not as good as we probably thought they were. K-State looks like a mess right now. Cincinnati lost last night at Villanova. I mean, you can keep going down the list. Yeah. Oklahoma State isn't even a threat right now. Texas Tech, they look okay, but they lost to St. Joe's, and St. Joe's is good. I don't want to – that's another mid-major team that we could talk about. But, like Texas Tech doesn't look as good as we probably thought they were. So, like, West Virginia is right there in the mix. If they put it together, which I firmly believe they will, they're going to be an NCAA tournament team, and they'll probably end up finishing anywhere between 5 and 7, probably higher, maybe higher than that in the Big 12. So, I just got to salute to the Mountaineers because they definitely made a statement down there in the Bahamas this past week.
Let me ask you something, Houston. Should we be concerned? Like, listen, they lost to a really good team. So let's put that. Let's put that. Let's make that a thing. Like they lost to Auburn. They lost to Bama, San Diego State. That's can be weather, but they've had a good. They've have a good pass, so that doesn't look as bad. But 4-3 early on in the season is there reason for concern? They got I think they got Butler next, right? In a few days. But should we be concerned, or it's just hey man, schedule everything?
I'm gonna say reason for concern, cause for concern, yes. But is it panic mode? No. Not by any means, not by any stretch of the imagination. Only because the two games that you mentioned that they lost at the Players Era Festival between Alabama and San Diego State, they both went to overtime. Both those games were in overtime, right? And we mentioned how many overtime games there were last week. And so to me, it says when you lose in overtime, it says, first of all, you had a chance to win the game in regulation and you lost the game by slim margins, right? So the biggest thing is obviously, look, you lost Jamal Shead. Jamal Shead, in my opinion, and most people's opinion, was the best point guard in the country last year. I know we had Tyler Kolek, we had Tristan Newton, we had all these other guys. But in my opinion, Jamal Shead was the glue that made Houston go far, right? Mm-hmm. And so when you lose a guy like that, you can't replace him with just one player. And I know they brought in Milos Uzan from Oklahoma. A lot of people love his game. I'm a fan of his. He's from Vegas originally. Really, really good player. But it takes time to get acclimated to the point guard spot, no matter what program you're at, because at the end of the day, your point guard is essentially your head coach on the floor, right? Yeah. And so for Uzan, he has to understand, hey, my job is not to be Jamal Shed. My job is to maximize this team as best that I possibly can. And so the only real thing that's lacking is because Houston, they're going to fight you like hell. They're going to beat you up on the boards. They're going to be physical. It's just the offense. So when I look at it, you need for Uzon to get comfortable, and then you need for Terrence Arsenault to get back into the flow of things too. Because again, last year he tore his Achilles, major setback. But I think this year he's still trying to get in the flow of things. So if you can get a little bit more offensive production from those two guys, because you're getting it from your other guards. Emmanuel Sharper's been good. LJ Cryer had 30 points, I think, in one of those games. You're getting great production from both those guys. It's just a little bit more offense between your starting point guard and one of your backup wings off that bench could take you a lot farther, because even your bigs between Tugler, Jawan Roberts, and Javier Francis are giving you great production, as they always have and always will. You're not going to ask them to score too much because they just don't really have that offensive prowess. But for the most part, again, if you can just get Uzon to settle in, and then again, a little bit more production and aggressiveness from Terrence Arsenault, Houston is going to be fine, and they're going to be back to being a national championship contending threat. Just give it a little bit of time for them to get back into the flow of things, and it's going to benefit them. And again, like you said, these losses that they've suffered aren't bad losses by any means at all. On top of, again, this past week, both those games were in overtime. So they were right there. It's one less foul, it's one less turnover, it's one more made free throw, it's little things like that. So Houston is going to put together. Do not let that record fool you guys. They are still going to be right there at the top of the Big 12 by the time March gets here.
So a team that we talked about earlier with teams in the state of Indiana, and the team in Indiana, the Indiana Hoosiers, team that I actually thought, and it's still going to happen. They still can win the Big Ten, I think, and that was my pick for the Big Ten. But they had some ugly losses. They got their ass kicked. And so I think they lost by what, 20?
30.
Right? 30 versus
Louisville.
And then Gonzaga, they lost by what, 15, 20 points, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Balo and Baku didn't have great games in both those games. So, and listen, they didn't play anyone before that. They did absolutely nobody. So you're going to get tested. I mean, they bounce back, and they, how you feel about Providence, they bounce back. But those two losses were ugly. So with Indiana, with the Hoosiers, what we feeling about them? Like I said, I wasn't all the way in, but I was like, all right, Purdue's not the same. I know Michigan State's figured things out. I'm like, they should be.
Mm-hmm.
They got Balo from Arizona, and Baco's second year. I feel like he's going to take a mass. I mean, he's been relatively good this season, and he's looked like he's going to be he looks like he should be a lottery pick. But those two losses were nasty, dog. Disgusting. Those are nasty. They're disgusting. Like to get absolutely dismantled by Louisville and then come back, and then I know it's Gonzaga, but still to 15-point loss for them. So what are we feeling about Indiana right now? Because those were some ugly losses.
It's crazy because just like you, I had Indiana projected as a top 5 team in the Big Ten, could potentially win it. Mike Woodson finally figuring it out. But at the end of the day, all their issues boil down to two things. Mike Woodson not adjusting to the play style of the 21st century of college basketball, and their players just not giving effort, because a lot of it is effort. I'll watch their game.
Yeah, I've heard that a lot from a lot of people. They talked about their lack of effort.
Yes, and at the end of the day, like we always say, a coach should never have to emphasize or coach effort, ever. That's just something, when you get on the court, you should automatically know, I got to give it my all, because any game could be your last game potentially. Obviously, you don't want that to be the case, but that's just the nature of the beast. But Mike Woodson, this was my biggest issue and my biggest concern with Indiana going into the season. I always said, if this happened, they're not going to have a chance. He is too determined to play through their big men between Renault and Balo, when some of their best players are on that perimeter between Miles Rice, Mackenzie Mbako, Kanan Carlisle. It's not an issue that you run your offense through the post, but it's an issue when you're trying to force feed them to go make you plays. Because at the end of the day, as big of a threat as Oumar Ballo is in the post, He's not a good free throw shooter. So that kind of nullifies exactly what he gives you, right? Because if you're creating all this contact and you're constantly getting the ball, you're going to get hacked. And you're as big as he is, he's like 7 feet and he's a huge human being, right? So you're going to create contact. But if you're going to the free throw line and you can't make your free throws, what are you giving us? You know what I'm saying? It's like guys that can score 30, but you give up 30 on the defensive end. At the end of the day, that means you're just a zero.
Canceled out, yeah.
Exactly. So that's one issue. You got to let your guards rock. You got to let Mackenzie and Bako rock. You have to put them in positions to succeed, and you're not really doing that. They're hooping just because they're good, but even Miles Rice had his struggles. And Miles Rice, we seen at Washington State last year, was a star battling leukemia. You know what I'm saying? Right now, he does not look good, and that's all a product of what Indiana's trying to do. And even Malik Reneau right now doesn't look comfortable. He doesn't look like himself, and it's because you're trying to force feed him and make him go to work when Umar Ballo's on the other side of him, bringing that extra help defender over closer to him so he has less room to operate with around in the paint. So when I watch him, it's so frustrating because it's like it has nothing to do with the talent. The talent is great. They did a great job of assembling pieces. They spent, I think, over $1 million in NIL to get all these guys out there to Bloomington, but it's the system, it's the lack of structure, and it's the effort that the players have to exude. Because when you watch the Battle for Atlantis, I forget the exact game it was, but it was a timeout where Luke Goody was in there going in on everybody. Like, he was just going off. Like, you got to be here. I don't know what exactly he was saying, but it looked like he was just saying, like, we're tripping right now, essentially. And that's what it looked like. And so, again, it's just so frustrating because, like, it's not that y'all just don't have talent. It's not that y'all are lacking firepower or anything like that. Y'all are lacking structure, and that's a coaching issue. That's on Mike Woodson. That's on his staff. And for y'all to get blasted by Louisville like that, like, you should feel ashamed because I got nothing against Louisville. Shout out to all my Louisville fans out there. I mess with y'all. But at the end of the day, this is Pat Kelsey's first year. He doesn't even have his own players in there like that. He just had to acquire pieces out of thin air because he got hired in the spring, and that's what you have to do when you're a first-year head coach in a new situation, right? But now, the fact that you almost got 30, you really should have got 30, but I think they lost by like 28, 29.
28.
The fact that you lost by that much to a Louisville team that isn't even that good, with all due respect, is mind-numbing. And Indiana fans should be furious because, again, everything has been implemented into the squad. It's like, shout out to Mo, it's like Mo's Ohio State Buckeyes. Y'all put in $20 million to this roster, and y'all lost y'all biggest game of the season and y'all second biggest game of the season between Oregon and Michigan, excuse me, right? And for Indiana, luckily, you play way more games, obviously, but this just can't happen, bro. You cannot let this happen. And again, getting blasted by Gonzaga is one thing. Like, Gonzaga is really good, but getting blasted to a Louisville team that's still trying to figure it out is not the way. And yeah, you beat Providence. Providence isn't good. We'll talk about the Big East in a second, but Indiana has to figure it out. And the last part of this, before I stop, what you started off this segment with, the Big Ten isn't even that good. So if you put it together, you still can win the Big Ten. The Big Ten is wide open. Purdue barely beat Ole Miss the other day. My Spartans are still trying to figure it out. Illinois got a lot of offense, but they can't score. We thought Wisconsin was really good. They lost versus Michigan yesterday at home. So, like, if Indiana could just start to put together and actually build some camaraderie and chemistry, you still have a chance to hoist the Big Ten championship at the end of the season.
No, you're right. And I feel like it's Mike Woodson. I love Mike Woodson. He coached my Knicks. You know, he's a respectable coach. He was coaching, he did his thing when he was coaching the Hawks back in the day. But man, if effort is an issue and it continues to be an issue, because that second half versus Louisville, I guess it was relatively, I think it was like a 7-point game, and they go in the second half and they just got the doors beat off of them. Like, they just got absolutely mollywopped that second half. Like I said, it's a Louisville team that is a, new coach, bunch of new players, this Indiana team on paper, at least, you're a 10 times better team. And this is a big opportunity. And I think the game before that, I forgot who they played, but it was a team that low D1 team. And then, they only won by 10 points, so like they came in there, they have been underwhelming. and then you have an opportunity to show, okay, like I said, it's Louisville. They're not the best team, but still an opportunity to show, and you lose by 28. And then it's like, all right, whatever. That goes where we got to get Gonzaga, and then lose by 15 to Gonzaga. So I feel like there's pressure, and you hear it. You hear it because Indiana is one of those schools, especially in basketball. Like the patience is very, very thin. You don't have it's just like what Louisville just went through. Like, no, they're like,
No.
and it's like there's certain schools that like, hey man, we want to preach patience, but like we got to see a little bit more than what we're saying, And I think I don't know if this could be his last season, because he isn't older, So we were already thinking about like, all right, how long is he going to be there? And even when he took the job, it was still like, okay, I get it. He used to play there, but it's like, he's old school, and we know how this new era of basketball is. So for Indiana, they got to figure it out. I mean, like I said, the Big Ten is there for them. There's no Zach Edey. You don't got to worry about that no more. So it's there for them to win it. They have the most talent in the Big Ten. It's you got to figure it out. Woody's got to figure it out. But there's a lot of conferences struggling. The ACC isn't good, I don't think.
Man.
We're seeing, the Big Ten's up and down. The Big 12 may be a little bit overrated, but there is one conference in particular that usually we really don't have these conversations about, but the Big East. The Big East, and obviously, think about the Big East the last few years. Who do we think about? Think about the back-to-back defending national champions, the UConn Huskies, and they haven't been the UConn Huskies. They got swept out of Maui. They got kicked out of there. When everyone's heard about, with Hurley and everything going on, and he said he's never going back. And some people started to be like, sounds like a sore loser, blah, blah, blah. But UConn is definitely not. And I think we all knew UConn wasn't going to be UConn, right? That was kind of obvious, right? It definitely reminded me of the Florida teams that won back-to-back, and they lost all those NBA players, and they didn't make the tournament that year. It kind of reminded me of that. I didn't think even to that extent, because I think this UConn team is better than that third year, that Florida team that missed the tourney after back-to-back. But we knew there was going to be some bumps, But Kev, I'm worried about UConn. Like I had to think. I'm like, can they miss the tournament? Like, I didn't think this would be the case, and they're still ranked. And there's a lot of people like, why are they still ranked? And I think they get the UConn bump. I think strictly because they UConn, they're gonna stay. I didn't think they'd be on rank. I thought they'd be straight. But UConn, they have struggled on defense. They can't rebound. The guard play has not been good. They can't defend the rim. It hasn't been good right now for Hurley and company. You see him getting a little bit more boisterous than usual. And listen, everything you've seen from Hurley, this is kind of normal. He's been doing it since he was at Wagner. He's probably been doing it since the womb, because that's just what the Hurleys are. I don't know if you don't know his dad and what he did in Jersey. Like, it's just, and his brother, then you don't know the Hurleys. But UConn has definitely struggled, and then as a whole, the Big East has been up and down. So the floor is yours. I know you want to talk about the Big East. Shoot.
So let me say this. I'm gonna preference all this, and I'm gonna end with UConn before I want to save them for last, right? The reason that I hold the Big East and the ACC to higher standards is two different reasons. For the ACC, it's because before conference realignment, you guys were the only conference that had two blue bloods. So that means you were facing teams that raised the standard and the level of every other program, right? So that forced other programs to get better. That's the ACC. Brush them to the side. For the Big East, let me bring back the ACC. The Big East and the ACC are the two most classic / historical conferences in college basketball. We are not where we are at today in college basketball without the ACC, and for damn sure without the Big East. We needed the Big East to keep us alive, right? And I'll say this too. God rest his soul to Luke Carnesecca, passed away a few days ago at the age of 99.
Rest in peace.
Legend of
Rest in
St.
peace.
John's. Definitely had to say that. But as for the Big East, Seton Hall is a mess right now. And I love Shaheen Holloway. You know how tough it is. They lost to Fordham. They've lost to a few different teams now. Villanova got a nice bounce back win, as I mentioned earlier, versus Cincinnati, but they started off their season losing to Columbia, and they had another loss. I can't remember who exactly it was, but they lost to another team that they probably should have beat, right? Butler lost to Austin P. Austin P, a military school, ladies and gentlemen. They lost to Austin P. Luckily, again, they bounced back. They've had some quality.
Where is Austin P? I don't even know.
I was just about to ask you that. I have no idea. With all due respect out there. But they bounced back. I believe they beat Mississippi State and SMU since then, but they still lost to Austin P. The only two teams in the conference right now that are holding the Big East up is Marquette and the DePaul Blue Demons. DePaul, as of right now, as we are speaking, has yet to lose this season. Now, tonight, they actually go down to Lubbock, I believe, and play Texas Tech. I'll be honest with you. If you're a gambling man or woman, they're minus 15, Texas Tech, that is, minus 15 and a half to win that game. I'd probably take DePaul to cover that because I think DePaul is not that bad with Chris Holtman. So shout out to them, right? And then Marquette is Marquette.
This is where Chris Holtman is. This is where he needs a program like this is better suited than, a big-time program like Ohio State.
Exactly. And then Marquette is Marquette. Again, I think they'll probably lose tonight, but I'm not knocking Marquette for going to Hilton Coliseum and losing to a tough Iowa State team whatsoever, right? They went and beat Purdue at home. They beat Maryland on the road. They've had some nice stacked up wins early in this season. So I'm not going to knock them. Xavier, Sean Miller, who missed the tournament last year, which is fine. It's still early. I believe this is year 3 for him out there in Cincinnati, if I'm not mistaken. They lost to Michigan. And I'm not going to sit here and act like Michigan is trash. They're not. They're a quality team. But I think they lost by like 18 to 20 points to a Michigan team that should not be better in Dusty May's year 1 compared to Sean Miller's 3rd year at Xavier. I'm sorry, that just shouldn't happen. And I know it's a bad matchup because Xavier really doesn't have any rim protection whatsoever, but they have guard play for days between Dalen Swain, Trey Green, Ryan Conwell, Dante Maddox, Davion McKnight. You have a lot of guys on that Xavier team. So the fact that you lost that game in that manner is what concerns me. Losing is whatever. If you lost by like 6-7 points, fine. But again, I think they lost by like 18 to 20. So that's inexcusable in my opinion. But the Big East as a whole right now is struggling. And I'm very curious to see. I don't want to fast forward too much because I'm a diehard college basketball fan, but I'll be very curious to see come Selection Sunday how many bids the Big East gets. How much would you guess right now, Prezi?
If I had to say right now, Marquette gets a bid.
Mm-hmm.
St. John's gets a bid.
Yep.
Creighton struggling. UConn right now is down 12 to Baylor.
Yep.
Wow. Butler?
Maybe.
If Butler can upset Houston, that helps.
Definitely.
If they can upset Houston. But right now, those two
so let's say no more than 3, right?
3, maybe 3. Right now, yeah, because St. John's they lost at the buzzer to Baylor, so like that's a. But they did lose to Georgia, but Georgia could be improved. Yeah, just improved. So, but still, like, yeah, 2, 3, right now, yeah, because Creighton has been a disappointment.
Haven't even mentioned them yet.
Yeah, they've been a disappointment. Yeah, obviously UConn's they might be 4 or 5-4 after this podcast. Seton Hall. The teams we thought that would be tournament teams are the teams that are right now. You wouldn't put them in March.
Exactly.
So yeah, only a couple teams right now. Yeah, that's not good. That's
where it gets tough at because I looked it up right now. Xavier lost to Michigan by 25. 25. So that's inexcusable. And then you touched on Creighton. And I did have high expectations for Creighton, but I also did have some reserve expectation just because you lost 2 stars between Baylor Shireman and Trey Alexander. So
Yeah.
realistically, you're going to take a bit of a step back. But right now, it's been a mix of the injury bug and this team just not being able to build that chemistry because Pop Isaacs left one of those games at the Players Era Festival early because he just looked hurt. I believe he had surgery this past offseason. Doesn't look like he's fully healed. You've been dealing with injuries to other guys, and then it feels like it's just Ryan Kalkbrenner against the world. And they lost at home in their rival game against the Cornhuskers of Nebraska by 11 points, right? That was one of the earlier games. Then at the Players Era Festival, they lost by San Diego State to 18, and they lost to Texas A&M by 4, and they barely beat Notre Dame without their best player, Marcus Burton, by 4 points, right? And nothing against Shrews, but Notre Dame does not look good this year. I think eventually they will be, though, because I believe in Michael Shrewsbury. But again, the Big East right now is just rough. It is rougher than rough. Providence is not going to be good. I'm rooting for Bryce Hopkins. I'm rooting for Kim English in that program, but they're not going to be good. The biggest question mark is probably Ed Cooley and the Georgetown Hoyas because they brought in Malik Mack from Harvard. They brought in Micah Peavy from TCU. They still got Drew Fielder. They got their freshman, Thomas Sorber from, PA. They have talent, but they haven't really played anybody. So we don't know what Georgetown is right now. And that's the thing.
It's still better than anything Patrick Ewing. Let's just put that.
But look, we just talked about Creighton barely beating Notre Dame. Notre Dame went to Georgetown and beat them by 21 points.
Yep.
So as a whole, man,
bad.
The college basketball fan in me always wants to see the Big East and the ACC do good because I know what those conferences mean to the game. But right now, they just haven't been good. And in particular, the Big East, who has had, 4 out of the last 10 national championships between Nova and UConn, you got to get it together. And I'm not even saying you got to have a national championship team. I'm just saying you should have more bids than potentially just 3. And you brought up St. John's. I'm not worried about St. John's. I'll tell you that right now because, as you said, they lost to Baylor in overtime or double overtime off a game winner by Jeremy Roach. And then you lost to Georgia, and I think Georgia's going to be a sneaky good team in the SEC. So I'm not going to knock St. John's at all. I think St. John's actually looks good, and St. John's probably, honestly, you can make case St. John's the favorites.
I think they're the best team in the Big East.
Exactly. So if you say that, I'm not going to look at you crazy because I probably agree with you right now. I love Marquette, but the Big East has got to get it together, man. And yeah, y'all didn't have the greatest non-conference, but you have plenty of time to figure it out in your conference. And I hope 1 or 2 teams can arise to the occasion. I don't know who I put my money on, but somebody got to figure this out because it can't just be those few teams that we mentioned between Marquette and St. John's. Somebody between Xavier, UConn, somebody got to figure it out. So I'm praying for the Big East, man, because it's rough right now.
It is rough. And you're, like I said, you're hoping that UConn they bounce back and get back to playing like UConn, which they should. I mean, they still got good players on their team. But it's definitely a rough start for the Big East right now. UConn make a little bit of a comeback versus Baylor, but it's tough. It's definitely tough out there in the Big East. But we'll see if they can bounce back and make it, because right now we just mentioned 2 to 3 teams that are possibly tournament teams in a conference that's, like you said, has won how many national championships? Of recent,
like so 4 of the last 10 years.
4 of the last 10 years, So it's definitely trying times for, but it's still early. It's still early, and so we'll see what happens. But yeah, there's a lot of good, especially today. A lot of great games. But there's some other news I wanted you to, and as far as the high school scene, because we got arguably the number 1 prospect in the country, AJ Demansa. He's cut his list down to 4, and I think it's Bama, UNC, BYU, which is still absolutely insane that BYU is in the running for arguably the best player in the country, and I think
in Kansas
and Kansas is in the running. Is BYU the favorite? Right? It seems that way, right? Like because you hear. And Walker had said this, and it now makes sense now because of the ties. It's like Ishbia got ties to Utah, and he's throwing money, and then there's like so I'm like, and then I'm like, oh yeah, oh wow, and doesn't he go to prep school out there, right?
Utah
So
Prep, yep, brand
you
new
know,
school.
so I'm like, he's going to be. I think, and they got money now. They got money now. So you think it's BYU? You think BYU is going to be the pick for him?
Yeah, and it's crazy because I think you can just see that the powers that be in the state of Utah, Danny Ainge included, are just trying to make.
Danny Ainge is in there too. Yeah, forgot
Yeah,
he's
they're just
involved.
trying to make Utah like a relevant spot in the USA. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
like we talked about, I think they started a hockey team, I believe.
Yeah, I think so. I think they're called the hockey team too right now.
Yeah,
I
so
think
like
it's
they
like
started a hockey team. Now they're fully investing in the BYU athletics. You've seen BYU is one of the top teams in football in the Big 12. And
yeah.
then, I mean, look, they're just trying to get it jumping out there. The Mormons trying to do some things now. And I respect it. I mean, look, when you have the funds, the accessibility, why not go all in? And if you have a chance to bring in one of the nation's top players who could potentially be generational, why not?
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that this is where we're at, I'm not mad at it. Like, honestly, like,
Yeah.
yes, I love seeing, like, I know we love the old school. We love seeing Duke and Kentucky and Kansas and Carolina all be good. Those programs are going to be good. They're always going to be good. I'm not worried about those programs whatsoever. But I do think seeing the talent flood out to different places, like Alabama, like Baylor, like going back to UConn, who I guess is considered a blue blood, but you know what I'm saying, right? You're seeing the talent being spread out more than ever. And do I want to see AJ there? Not really, just because I don't, I could be wrong. I could be very wrong, but I don't see BYU really being a tournament team until a few years.
Yeah.
Like Mark Pope had it jumping. They barely got in last year. I believe they were 500 in the Big 12, like at an exact 9-9. But Kevin Young is going to take some time. Luckily, again, he has the resources. He has the support of all the important people out there. But they're not going to make the tournament this year, even with Yegor Demon, who looks like he's going to be a lottery pick, probably will be as a 6'9" point guard. But my thing is, if you're going to get a player like AJ DeBansa, which it sounds like they are, you must put the right pieces around him to be successful, because I want to see the top players while they're in college get a chance to experience the NCAA tournament. You know what I'm saying? That is most important to me. I think about certain players that didn't, like for instance, my SoCal guys, Zaire Williams went to Stanford, didn't sniff it. Josh Christopher went to Arizona State, didn't sniff the NCAA tournament. I want to see the top players play in the NCAA tournament. And that's not me saying, oh, go to Kentucky, go to Kansas. No, go to a school that's competitive and that's going to maximize your skill set. And for AJ DeBansa, BYU can do that. But again, I want to see Kevin Young start to put some pieces together and make them a relevant program in the Big 12. So I think it's interesting. I think we're living in a great time for the game. And to see the top player in the country potentially go to Provo, Utah is crazy to think about.
Yeah, it's wild to think that, but yeah, he those are the four teams that are on his Final Four, and then, like I said, it feels like it's BYU that is uh, going to be the school of choice for him. So that's going to be interesting. And another news, Elijah Arenas is reclassified for this year, and I know there's a lot of people who we've talked about reclassification, how and the pros and cons of that. And he's out there by you in the left coast, so you've seen him a lot more than I, and I've seen some games in him, and he looks like he's going to be a very, very good, player at the next level. He's a 5-star kid, so he reclassified to 2025. So give me your thoughts on Arenas, his game, and then I don't know the list of schools that are interested. I'm sure Arizona's in there
Yeah.
because his pops played there, but I don't know who else would be interested. I'm sure there's going to be abundance of people interested. But just give me your thoughts on him reclassifying to 2025, and just talk a little about his game, because I know people see clips in it, and you, like I said, you're close to him out there. So just give me your thoughts on Elijah reclassifying.
He's a bucket. I mean, I think Gilbert did a great job of training him personally and putting him around the right players. I've seen he did a podcast with Shout Out to Switch Cultures, where he was talking about, going playing ones with KD before school one day and rushing back. Like, he is a certified hooper, right? I think one of my favorite parts about his game is I don't want to say it like this, but I'm going to just say it. He kind of has that mellow triple threat package where he's so versatile when he gets the ball in his hands, whether it's going to be a jab step, whether it's going to be a rocker step, whether it's going to be a blow by, whether it's going to be a pull up in your face, whatever the case, he knows how to, swipe a defender's arm down and get past them. He just has so much game. He got the step backs, he got the floaters, he knows how to play off 2 feet. He has a complete game. And I was glad to see him reclass just because I feel like I'm not going to say he would be wasting his time in high school, but I don't think it's much more room for improvement in the high school game that could take him to a different level. So I think getting to school faster and earlier is the best thing going for him. And I believe the schools to look out for are Arizona and Louisville. And it's crazy to say those two. His sister actually goes to Louisville right now. She's a freshman. And he has
Right, yeah, his
Adidas
daughter was
ties.
in Louisville. Yeah.
Yeah, he got them Adidas ties playing with Compton Magic. So shout out to the Magic boys. But it's interesting, right? Because the thing about reclasses, especially when you're a top player, is it creates a domino effect, right? Because schools are already recruiting certain players, and then they're like, oh, this guy becomes available.
Changes.
Exactly. You know what I'm saying? So we got to kind of stack our cards and make sure we invest into the right player. And so I definitely think Arizona's going to be in the mix. Obviously, as you mentioned, Gilbert went there. And then Louisville too. Pat Kelsey is trying to build something. And on top of the fact that Elijah will probably be a one and done, but you got to remember too, Tyran Stokes, who's originally from Louisville, is one of the top players in the class of 2026. Elijah is now reclassing to 2025, but they're looking at him too, right? Because he's from there. He's a hometown kid. And so I think if you want to attract a player like that, you got to start by building a foundation, getting the right players in there, getting big time players in there, and then winning games heals everything. So I definitely look at those two. It could range, but I definitely believe that Arizona and Louisville are going to be in the mix for his services. And Elijah Arenas, man, when you look at that 2025 class, he's already going to be one of the better guards in that class. And that's a class that has Jasper Johnson, a Caden Lewis, Darren Peterson, all these guys, right? So it's a loaded 2025 class with the Boozer Bros, Jalen Harrelson, Darius Adams, so much talent across the board. Originally, Jeremiah Fears was in this class before he decided to leave and go to Oklahoma. But yeah, man, this is big time news, but I think it's the right move for him and his family. And I expect him to be a major contributor year one at the Division I level.
I heard somebody. I was just scrolling through Twitter, and somebody was said, "Wouldn't it be hysterical if Elijah is interested in Duke or wants to go to Duke, and Gilbert got to root for Duke now because you know how he always gets on because Coach K cut him on the Olympic team, so he always gets on Duke and we beat him in the national championship in 2001. So he always has hatred for Duke. So it's just funny that I saw somebody saying, it'd be hysterical if he had to root for Duke if Elijah goes there. But yeah, it's going to be interesting recruiting because now, like you said, it changes everything. Because now you're like, oh, you may have interested in, like, I'm sure Duke. They're like, oh crap, we just got Caden, but it's like Elijah is different, That's different, And we seen their point guard play, and they're probably like, we can't go through this again. We need someone legit, So it's like I said, he's good. He's really good, man. And sometimes he looks like he's so bored. He's so bored when he plays because he's playing. He's just because he still plays. He's just playing high school ball. He's in public school. He plays public school ball, so it's different than playing, private school. So it's the talent is not as good. So it just looks like he just be bored, but he's a good player. So that's but yeah, there's a couple recruiting things going on. There's we got Duke playing. God, who am I forgetting?
Auburn.
Oh, Duke Auburn tonight. Obviously, I don't know how I forgot that. A lot of really good games today. What are some games as we're talking? Obviously, people they're probably listening to the next day. But what are some matchups that you're really intrigued for this Wednesday, this cap, and then further, even for the rest of the week?
Yeah, man. I mean, you got Marquette, Iowa State. Again, that's going to be both those teams, two of their bigger matchups. I mean, you look at this SEC ACC challenge. The SEC is wiping down the ACC right now. I believe after last night it was 9-1. The only loss was Clemson beating Kentucky. So SEC has been absolutely dominant in that matchup. But definitely looking at Marquette, Marquette, Iowa State. Again, you mentioned Baylor's playing UConn right now. My Spartans traveled to Minnesota to play in the Big Ten. It's not nothing crazy, but obviously that's just a Big Ten matchup. You got Creighton hosting Kansas. Ryan Kalkbrenner versus Hunter Dickinson, two of the better centers.
one. Yeah.
Yeah, two of the better centers in all of college basketball to watch out for. You got Alabama going to Chapel Hill. Alabama's going to the Dean Dome to take on the Tar Heels, right? This is their first game losing after losing Latrell Wrightsell for the season. I want to see how they match up. Carolina's backs are kind of against the wall because they kind of struggled against Maui, or in Maui, shall I say. They beat Dayton, but they lost to my Spartans in overtime. They lost to Auburn. So I want to see, how does the Tar Heels respond? What are you going to get from RJ Davis, who kind of struggled in Maui? Drake Powell looks like he's a stud. We all expected that. He's going to
They
only
can't rebound. We said this,
Yeah.
right? They're going to have a problem on the boards and protecting the rim. And guess what's happening? They cannot rebound. They can't protect the rim.
So I want to see, what is Hubert instilling into them to get it right? What is Hubert instilling them to be that top tier team that they are and will be in the ACC? So I definitely think those are some intriguing matchups. And you look around, I mean, it's a lot, honestly. Like you can look anywhere, even like some under the radar games. Pitt versus Mississippi State. I think Pitt is probably the third best team in the ACC. Honestly, I watched them. They've had some big time wins. I know they lost in that championship game. I think it's called the Greenbrier Classic out there in West Virginia. They lost to Wisconsin in that championship game, but they went to Columbus and beat Ohio State in overtime off a game winner from Zach Austin. Right, Jalen Lowe is a stud, one of the better sophomore point guards in the country. They got a lot of players. Cameron Corrin has been really good for them, amongst others. Ishmael Leggett obviously has been a stud for the past few years for them. So I think that's an under the radar game. I mentioned DePaul going down and playing Texas Tech, right? I mean, you anywhere you look right now, it's a whole bunch of good games. So just do not take it for granted, because you're getting top tier talent every single night on the floor, and it's being displayed and played at a high level.
Yep, lot of interesting. Like Butler Houston to me is like a low key interesting game. To see how Butler can play when they go to Houston. So definitely some good matchups. I'm looking forward. UConn, Baylor right now. UConn made a comeback, so this looks like this could be going. Obviously, Duke, Auburn, a lot of good games today, Kev. So but I appreciate you, brother. Another good episode of Get About Your podcast. Any closing thoughts before we sign off?
Man, I appreciate everybody that tapped in. We're going to keep it rolling. Again, college basketball is at its peak right now. Conference play is starting. It's only going to get better and better as teams, start to figure each other out more and teams put pieces together. But as always, man, we appreciate y'all for tuning in. We're going to keep pumping these out. And y'all stay easy out there. Enjoy y'all December and get ready for this new year.
Yeah, man, it's cold out here in the East Coast, man. It's crazy. It went from like 80 degrees in like the mid-November. It was like, oh man, this global warming stuff, this wild. And then just like that, bro. 30 degrees, 20 degrees. I don't like this. I don't like this.
Y'all stay bundled up out there, man.
Yeah. Y'all don't got to worry about that on the left coast, but out here we got to worry about that. But yeah, appreciate everyone who's tuned in. We got over 100 people tapped into today's show. So appreciate you. Make sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel. Make sure to 5-star rating on whatever podcast platform, Spotify, Apple. Give us a 5-star rating. That helps out the pod a lot. But on that note, be well, be safe, take care, Get a Book of Podcast. We out.